And so, as Tracy mentioned in my bio, my background had been in K-12, and then through my connection with leadership opportunities, I went and got my doctorate in educational leadership. So I had finished a large career in K-12, and my husband and I decided to move to the University of Kentucky for an academic position, an administrative position for him. And I had started a doctoral program many, many years ago. I say planted the seed many, many years ago. And so rather than continue in K-12 with district leadership or learning a new school system, I decided to return to get my doctorate in educational leadership. And so I belabor this point because it is relevant to this topic today. So, University of Kentucky in Lexington is where we were, and I was super excited because I thought, well, this is just going to be a great way to make connections with people. I'll be in town. I won't be in the school district, but I'll be back at a university setting. And so I enrolled in the doctoral program to find out that for educational leadership, it was an entirely online program. So there I was in a new environment, thinking I was going to walk campus and make my physical connections. And this was back in 2017. So this was prior to COVID and a real advancement in distance education. But I wound up having the most incredible experience, and thus it turned into my focus of research, which my dissertation was in action research, and then now my lifelong passion of connectedness and through online programming. So just to wrap that up, so I wound up focusing on the onboarding of doctoral students and through their journey. And this is where I came across some of the research and frameworks that I'm going to discuss with you today. Fast forward, I finished my degree at this late stage of life, and we wind up moving to Tucson, again, for my husband's position. And the University of Arizona began a initiative across the university in their General Office of General Education around bookend courses for both at the beginning of the general ed experience and at the end, where students would develop an e-portfolio. This wound up just being a perfect fit because, of course, the onboarding of students into the university with a one-credit course called University 101, it just snapped right to my interest in onboarding and creating connections. And then, of course, the 301 is a completely online course where they develop a portfolio. We also offer online sections for our global as well as the university online degrees. So there was the online element. Backtracking just a moment, with the University of Kentucky, when Tracy introduced us all and said, where are we from? The highlight of that lived experience through an online program really was that the perspectives that we were able to share by being in an online environment, right? There were students in the doctoral program from all over, not just the US, but the world. And so that impact of being able to connect with each other through an online format and giving different perspectives has been, I think, the greatest value that online distance education can offer. So then as I took the position at University of Arizona, we also had, of course, 150 sections of this course to offer in person, along with some sections online. And that created the need for many, many other instructors and a larger instructional staff. So the setup that we have there are 13 full-time professors of practice like I am. And then we are kind of a facilitator or a team lead of about 9 to 12 instructors. So we meet once a week and we talk about the curriculum and we support their engagement with the curriculum of the 101 and the 301. So it's a little bit of the instructional coaching as well as participating in the hiring and the training. And so that's what brings me to this space around not only onboarding for a sense of connectedness with students, if that is where your interest is, but also if you are leading a group of people and onboarding staff, staff or graduate students, whatever. So I was hoping that at least there's just two of us here, Tracy, but in your interest for the topic of building connections through strategic onboarding, is there an interest that you have more specific around onboarding of students within that environment or onboarding staff and, faculty or graduate students? You can either unmute or just share in the chat. I'm just kind of curious.
I can say that in my previous, I was an instruction design manager in my previous university, and we did not have an onboard for new instructional designers. And we didn't realize this, and it didn't dawn on us until they were lost coming in. So we had to really quickly get an onboarding going.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, Lee mentions either is fine, thinking students. And I know that's a real strong focus about when we talk about connectedness and helping our students feel connected, especially in the online environment. So as I go through, I will edit a little bit. Some of it is around onboarding staff, but my dissertation was completely about onboarding students to create that sense of connectedness. And you'll see that it really goes hand in hand. And so I think you'll find all of the topic very interesting. Okay, so there we go. And so why are we here? I kind of already went over that. I wanted to know, I think when you join a session like this, you're maybe keyed in on the connection word, or maybe you're keyed in on the onboarding and the practices, right? So hopefully as we go through, you'll get a little bit of all of that so that you feel like your interests are supported. I think the key word also is strategic, and I'll be highlighting that as well. And so building connections in and onboarding. I think people, when you hear onboarding, we are all kind of sold right now on onboarding is important. It's out there, we know. But how we are onboarded and the type of emphasis that's placed on the strategies and the structures, I think is where there can be some continued discussion. So just while we're here, and if you want to put something in the chat, you can, but mostly what I wanted was for us to think back to an experience of being onboarded that we felt went well. And again, even though you might have an interest in the onboarding of students, you can think both. You can think this is, you can think in terms of the entering of a student into an organization like college or higher ed, right? That's also very similar to the experience of an employee being entering and being onboarded into a business organization, a company. And likewise for staff or faculty in the institution of higher ed being onboarded into that role. So thinking back onto an experience where you were onboarded that you felt like it went well. What was the thing that stuck out to you that you remember was effective? And if you're inclined and are participating, even though cameras are off, go ahead and throw it in the chat. Something that went well. And then sometimes our memories are more strong in the experiences where onboarding didn't go well. So any of these questions, if you have something that you could share, or imagining um, clarity and wayfinding. Okay. Was that good or did that need to be improved, right? It could be either one. And feel free to unmute if you want or just continue to use the chat. Imagining that ideal experience of being onboarded. What are some things that you would want included? And again, if we're thinking about students, what do you think is the most important thing for students to get out of an onboarding experience to the university setting or even to your specific class? Because as we engage students and welcome them into our learning space, we're onboarding them into our particular course. If you're leading a unit or a department or even uh, a group committee, if you will, the onboarding of members and how you set expectations and create connections. Yes, scenarios are helpful for both students and staff. Absolutely. Giving people something to, work from or work off of. So my journey through my dissertation and research as I was searching for, that was what went well. Yes, thank you, Lee. Uh, and just yeah, an anonymous avalanche of info. We're going to be talking a little bit more of that. So thank you. Yes, some clarity and just a thread of how to navigate and connection, communication, very important. So as I was diving into the research of this online environment and how to build connectedness, we know that within a doctoral program, which was the specific on my action research, can sometimes be a very lonely and isolating journey. Um, and so, I began looking into the research around the online environments and how to create connectedness to any member entering into an organization. And I came across Talil Bauer's research in human resource and business. So here I was in the higher ed space, but I'm reaching out and finding this, what I began to feel was really relevant research that had shown some good results around how do you effectively onboard individuals to a new environment, right? And so she had developed through her research this framework called the 4 C's framework. And just a thumbs up if anyone's heard of this framework or have heard of the 4 C's. Okay. So I found it really fascinating. And this is where the framework begins. And you'll recognize a lot of this. And so sometimes I talk about the framework being something not necessarily new, but actually really affirming to some of the things that we're already doing, strategies we already have in place, or just sometimes what we know are our best practices. Sometimes from the poor practices we experienced, and sometimes from really effective onboarding that we've participated in. And so one of the first C's that Talil Bauer came across, what that most businesses and organizations use as part of their onboarding is compliance. And this makes a lot of sense, right? This is the mandatory actions, the legal paperwork, the new badging, the FERPA, the Title IX. And if we're thinking in terms of students, it's the same thing. There's compliance issues for students in particular programs. There's certain things they have to do and that they have to know about in order to proceed towards their degree path, right? So that compliance piece we know is very important. Never going to discount that. Pretty much everybody, if they don't do anything, they do compliance, right? That's kind of a forced a piece to focus on. But another C that she came across that pretty much most organizations, businesses were using with new employees or new members was clarification, understanding their role and performance expectations. And for in business or with new staff coming on, right? If you're having a new member to your unit or to your group, you're going to be talking about what's their role and making sure they understand what it's about, the performance expectations, job description, faculty handbook, employee handbook, any uh, and I have a little typo there, reviews, and performance criteria, workspace. So just the clarification, how the role is going to roll out for you, right? And same with students. If we're thinking about students, whether it be undergraduate or graduate, there are things that they need to have clarified. They need to understand the pathway towards being an undergrad student or being a graduate. What are the degree? In our case, the program that we're instructing, it's how to maneuver through the gen ed structure at the University of Arizona, right? So these things would be uh, the same in an online program and an in-person program. But then what Talil Bauer found was two additional C's, as she would call them. And those were around culture and around connection. Now, these C's were not across the board in all organizations, but she found these two to be elements of strategic onboarding, intentional onboarding with those organizations that seem to have a higher effective approach with employees, higher retention, greater job satisfaction. And so I looked at those and I was like, wow, those are very interesting because, again, compliance and clarification, but how do we get to the connectedness? That was the piece that I was interested in, especially in an online environment. But here, let's just go over the other two C's that her research shared with us. The culture, the norms, the values, stories, and symbols. It's really important to share what matters in your organization. And again, we can so easily split this into staff, faculty, higher education. We can move it from the business piece right into our colleges, our departments, our units or teams. It's important to share what matters. And we can do the same thing with students, right? It's important for students as they enter the university for them to get an intentional understanding of the culture. Again, in an online environment, we're trying to create that culture for them, right? We're trying to carve and craft a space within the online environment where they understand they are a member of a group. They are part of something, and that includes the culture. What does the online program? What is their history? What are the values and the symbols? And what are the things that matter, right? So the culture is a key component. And then we move straight into the thing that we're really, really wanting to focus on and that we feel is important, which is the connection, the feelings of acceptance, the building of relationships, the feeling of belonging and being in that group. So feeling of connection, in an online environment, many people say, well, that's what's lacking. Well, I can tell you just from the start of our online conference, with the way that Haley was able to describe, and Meg welcomed everyone, and of course, with the keynote speaker and the thought and the comments in the chat. Um, I felt immediately, I'm the one that said, I can't stop smiling. I felt immediately a sense of connection with people in the online environment, and I wasn't having to be right there in person with them. Um, so so there are the 4 C's of the onboarding strategies that Talil Bauer researched and talked about. Now, when I use this presentation with people that are interested in creating or reimagining their onboarding, whether it be for students or individuals coming into their department or team or unit, right? We use the 4 C's and Talil's framework as a lens because maybe what's happened while I was talking, you're saying, oh, yeah, I've done that. Oh, yeah, I recognize compliance. These 4 elements are easy enough to understand and many times are things that we've experienced. And they may even be things, if you're the one in charge of crafting that onboarding experience, that you already do. So sometimes I say that the framework that we offer of the 4 C's are a way to use it as a lens to look at your own onboarding efforts. The piece that Talil makes very clear and that I found out through my research is it's the intention of looking at each of these, right? And the focus that we place on them. And through our efforts and through our strategies or the actual framework that we implement, by identifying these 4 is what's going to make our onboarding experience for whoever we're bringing on stronger, deeper, more impactful for them. And it's that culmination of all 4 of those and that experience that's going to lead to the end product that we want, which is higher retention, that sense of connectedness, greater satisfaction. Now, I think if I do this, you can see my screen. This is an audit that we have created. I've done this I've done this presentation in a 2.5-hour workshop with individuals who are trying to reimagine their entire onboarding process. And so I'm offering this one piece here just as a template to say, okay, what you would do to begin with is take this framework as a lens and lay it out and lay out all of your efforts. Like, where are you doing these things? And then check and see, what would I call that? Would I call that, is that more of a compliance piece? Is that more clarifying the role? Where am I doing the connecting piece? How am I doing the culture? So that, again, the whole idea is to be intentional and thus the word strategic about the ways we go about onboarding so that we hit all 4 of these. And I'm happy to share this along with other information that we have in our workbook that we did. And so let me see now if I can maneuver back to my let me see. Now, where did my presentation go? Here we go. Okay, I'm back in it. Okay. All right. Any questions? Let me just stop to let us digest some of all that I've thrown at you. Any questions or comments around the 4 C's? If you've not heard of them, is there one in particular that resonates with you?
I know that culture has become a big question. Like I've been on even on search committees. I've been asked as a search committee person, uh, prospective employer, candidate, what's your culture like? Same. Um, I've I've asked that same question when I'm being interviewed. So I know that that is a big, people want to
Yeah.
know about it.
Absolutely. And another way I heard somebody describe culture, it's the way we do things around here. What's the way you do things around here? And so culture is really important. And people do, you're right. People want to know what it is because they want to know if it's going to be the right puzzle piece fit. So yeah, so identifying those four, and again, whether it's onboarding students, and we've used this 4 C's. Let me share that when I came into the role as assistant professor practice with the 101 and 301 course, I was onboarded to that role. And my experience in that onboarding, I was blown away. They didn't list the 4 C's, they didn't, but I thought, they know the framework. Look, I see it. I see connection. I see compliance. I see this. I saw them all. I went through the onboarding and then, of course, I connected with the course director and I explained my area of research, my dissertation, and my background. And I said, this was the most amazing onboarding experience I've ever been through. And he said, well, it just seemed like good practice, right? So it was coming from his natural self of what we know is good practice. And then we were able to overlay the framework, and it was very affirming. And in other presentations we break out the time spent on each of the elements because we went back to the agenda and we like really laid it out. And so it can be done even just naturally without knowing the framework. But like I said at the beginning, the use of the framework as a lens to see your onboarding efforts can be both illuminating as well as affirming. And so I find it to be extremely beneficial, and people seem to really embrace it. So where do you see your current onboarding efforts? And again, this can be that analysis of both what we do with our students as we welcome them into the learning space, or what we do with faculty and staff who are also engaging for the first time with our organization. So there's passive onboarding. Passive onboarding meaning there's compliance and there's some clarification, but there's really no culture or connection efforts, right? And we've been members of organizations where as we entered, we got the bare bones. We got the compliance, had the job description in hand or whatever, or we entered a group as a new member, and we entered and we kind of knew what we should do and what we shouldn't do and a little bit of the goal, but then that was it. Let's get to the work and let's just keep it right. High potential onboarding. And by the way, the passive onboarding is where Talil Bauer says most organizations are at, right? And so the next would be high potential onboarding. Compliance, of course, we're always going to see that taken care of because we have to. Some clarification and a little bit of culture and connections. And this is where a large amount of organizations, I think, have moved towards because like you said, Tracy, people are asking about culture, right? People want to know about connections. And so maybe the onboarding has these things, but there's no systemic process. So again, it's that piece of being that strategic piece, that intentional piece, and that actual laid out of a framework of we do this, and this is why we do it. And using the framework as a reference, I think is really helpful. And where do we really want to be? We really want to be with that proactive onboarding. All four are addressed, and they're addressed formally and systematically, right? In ways that can support. And when we do that, when we do all four with intention and strategies, we're going to get that sense of connectedness built. Um, and and I know this because that was my dissertation research, and this goes back to, Lee's interest in the student, maybe onboarding students in an online environment. So in my dissertation, it was action research, and I implemented specific strategies around each of them. And let me just share a few. One was developing the Teams channel, right? A Teams channel so that there could be that dialogue, but more importantly, not just around information, not just around the compliance piece or even the clarification of what it means to be a doctoral student or in any other case, an undergrad student. But in our department, a little side, what we called the water fountain channel, right? The water fountain is, in person offices, you meet up and you see people at the water fountain, or the coffee machine is where you'd find me. But we did the water fountain and we established a channel for just, engaging in content free, nothing heavy, children and pets and fun Friday jokes or whatever to, build on that connected piece, right? We engaged with the use of videos, interviewing professors to demystify that piece around doctoral professors and how do we get the information. We did asynchronous videos, but also some synchronous online chats with peer older doctoral students, not just older by age, but older in the program, so that students could connect with each other in a faculty-free environment and ask questions around advising or advisors as you had to select them. But creating space, even in the online environment, where you could get the information, the connections, the support, that kind of stuff. So it did. And then we ascertained through, surveys around connectedness at the end, how did these things work for you? Which ones of the activities increased a sense of connectedness? And quite a few of them showed results in that way. So now I want to offer flip the script. Flip the script because what I found in that experience that I had, and I was always talking compliance, clarification, and then culture and connection. And then all of a sudden, in my own lived experience with that onboarding to the group at University of Arizona, what did we do first in that experience that blew my mind? We focused completely on connections. We focused on getting to know each other, getting to know our strengths. We did a strengths finder test. We talked about how we were showing up with our own identities. We just got deep on knowing each other. And then the culture and the clarification and compliance. And what I found, because I was honed into it, right, and sensitive to it, what I found was, you know, doing the connecting piece first allowed us to become trusting and comfortable and ready and willing to ask questions and be vulnerable when we got to the clarification and compliance piece. And I think if you think about your own experiences when you're new and you're tight, right? And you're like, oh, and you get the compliance and the clarification, you're not quite ready for the questions or the I don't understand this, or can I ask a pushing question on that, right? So flipping the script is something that I really encourage people as they're looking at their onboarding efforts. And I do want to get time for some questions, but I sense my research have extended the framework, as you would find when you get out there in the literature, extending the framework to talk about confidence, creating that sense of confidence for not only new staff or students coming into your environment, right? But creating that confidence and making sure you have intentional strategies around checking back. And again, this goes back exactly to students as well as to your staff. The checking back, checking in, super important. And making sure that the staff or the students are feeling capable of doing the job well. And the final one becomes like an overarching one. It fits so well with the pedagogy of kindness, with many, recent calls for proposals and conferences where I've seen courageous care on AAC&U, other things where we're talking these days about care for ourselves, care for others, right? And how do we do that? focusing on the human element, helping people feel valued, creating opportunities to build the team and expand on that culture. And then I want to just share these three keys or assurances that came out of my research, specifically in the online environment and around students. So this really matches with those that are focused on students, but I've also seen it now play out when you're welcoming in new members of staff or faculty or whatever. Three keys or assurances. We had three goals when we did some of these intentional activities and strategies with students in the online environment. We wanted to make sure that they could say, I'm not alone, right? Online environments can feel very isolating and you're behind your computer and you can feel very alone. So we want to create those opportunities where they feel, I'm not alone. We want them to feel like someone's got my back. And when it was students, I was speaking specifically around faculty, knowing and being able to say, faculty have my back. And I know this because I've engaged and I've had connection with them. And the other piece was, I know what to do next. So these three keys or assurances, they feed right into the 4 C's around compliance and clarification. You know what to do next. You've got access to the information, connectedness and culture where you're feeling like I'm not alone. I know people that are around me that can support me. And I know that there are people that are going to work with me towards my success in this organization, in this group, department, or even in this online university. So those, I think, are excellent things. Here's just a list of some of the references that's very much out there in the research and some really fascinating work that's being done. And I would be happy to take any questions in the very last few minutes that we have, and would love for anyone to connect with me around the 4 C's and beyond, as we mentioned. And you may come up with your own C's that you find are important. You can get a little crazy with the alliteration, but to share your story with the framework as you might use it, to engage more with it, or to discover even more strategies with each of the C's and beyond. So, questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Heileman. So if you do have a question, please feel free to post it in the chat or unmute yourself. And if you have any questions, and we welcome all questions.
Oh, the 7 C's. Yeah, so the 7 C's, we extended the framework from the 4 C's, and we've added confidence, building confidence, check back. We're finding, and the literature and research is finding check back to be very important in a successful onboarding. And then love it, 7 C's. And then the final was care, right? So I had 7 C's. Love the typos. And now it's got a mind of its own.
I love how you brought in the compliant, how the framework originally, the compliance, clarification, culture, and connections, and talked about the intention and the strategies, and because that's needed.
Yes.
And then I really liked how it was extended. And piggybacking off of Lee, it was the extensions, when you said is that something that you did in your further in your research? Is that what?
No, it's what I'm continuing to do now. And so, I've been taking the 4 C's, and with two of my colleagues, we are now moving into the training, the online training that we do with staff. And so we've turned a focus a little bit towards the human resource element, but yet at the same time, we're still applying it to the training of our instructors, right? And so, and we can see that and then we also can see the 4 C's in that first bookend course, which is University 101, where it's bringing students into the university and also applying it to the online classes that we teach of the 101, the 1 credit, as they begin their gen ed journey. So
thank you. That's interesting. Any other questions or comments? We have 1 minute, but what I wanted to do before then, if feel free to continue putting anything in the chat if you want to, but it does bring us to the end of today's session. A huge thanks to Dr. Heileman for all that you've been doing and being a part of this conversation. So what I want to do, I'm going to put it in the chat if you don't mind, for participants to, we always have a feedback form, always looking for ideas, ways to improve. So I put the link in the chat. So feel free, please, to click on that. And we hope to see you all at the other sessions.
thank you all so much.